They say family is supposed to be your safe harbor, but some nights I lie awake wondering if I'm just a ghost trapped beneath the surface, visible only when I'm needed. I never imagined I'd be the one holding everything together quietly, while the spotlight shone elsewhere. It's exhausting, this invisible labor I've carried for years. I'm Loretta Roberts, 29 years old, a registered nurse specializing in pediatric care, and to my family, I'm just the responsible one. The one who shows up, who never complains, who patches cracks without making a sound. Just last month, I drove Mom to yet another specialist appointment, the scent of antiseptic and old magazines filling the cramped waiting room as I held her hand, steady and calm. Meanwhile, Hayden, my older brother by 3 years and the family's golden child, was at the annual family party. I can still picture him laughing easily, soaking up Mom and Dad's praise as if it were sunlight. His charisma is like a magnet, everyone drawn to the charm, the effortless confidence. And me? I'm the shadow in the background, the one who juggles long, grueling shifts at the hospital, handles the bills, and manages crises without a word of complaint. I catch the sideways glances when I mention my work or the months I've spent caring for Dad after his heart surgery, the subtle dismissals that make my contributions seem trivial, but I brush it off. It's easier that way. Easier to hold on to hope that one day they'll see me for who I am, not just the quiet nurse or the other child. What they don't know is that the house we all grew up in, the place filled with childhood memories and family arguments, is legally in my name. Daniel and I have been quietly shouldering the mortgage payments for years, but I never used this fact as leverage. I'm holding on to the family I love, even if they don't fully see me. I wonder sometimes if my sacrifices mean anything to them. I've come to learn that you can be the backbone and still feel utterly alone. The summer I turned 12 is etched into my memory, etched with sharp edges I can't smooth over. It was the night of Hayden's high school graduation party, a big, flashy event that felt like the entire neighborhood was invited. Mom handed Hayden a gleaming watch, heavy with promise, and a fat envelope stuffed with a check. I stood nearby, clutching my own small gift, which felt more like a consolation prize, a proud of you hug and a pat on the head. The applause echoed loud and proud for Hayden. For me, there was only silence. Mom and Dad made it crystal clear. Hayden was their golden child, their shining star. I tried convincing myself it was tough love, that Hayden needed more pressure to succeed, but the sting of being overlooked stayed with me. When I brought home a scholarship award at 16, Mom barely looked up from her book. Meanwhile, Hayden's first football trophy sparked a full-blown family event, complete with balloons and cake shaped like a football field. One night, after a heated argument with Hayden, Mom pulled me aside and said something that still haunts me. "You just don't understand the sacrifices we made for him." Those words sliced through me. For the first time, I realized the playing field wasn't level. Their love came with strings, and I was the one who didn't fit. I remember sitting on my bed afterward, staring at the faded wallpaper, feeling like I was a puzzle piece forced into the wrong box. Those years shaped me. They taught me to shrink, to expect less. But inside, something kept burning, a feeling that maybe one day I'd be more than the overlooked daughter. For years, I tried to prove my worth the only way I knew, through sacrifice. Daniel and I chipped in $150 every month toward the mortgage for 5 years, quietly footing $75,000 of our parents' home. I lost count of the evenings spent by Dad's hospital bedside after his heart surgery, holding his trembling hand through the long nights. We've poured over $10,000 into Mom's medical bills, balancing that with my exhausting hospital shifts and Daniel's steady but demanding job. I gave up vacations, passed on promotions that required moving away, and shelved personal dreams, all to keep the family afloat. Yet, when I mention any of it, I'm met with shrugs or, worse, dismissive remarks like, "You're supposed to help." It's as if my sacrifices are just expected, not appreciated. Daniel, my rock through it all, sometimes shakes his head in frustration. "Loretta, you deserve to be seen," he says quietly. "You can't keep giving and getting nothing back." I want to believe him. I tell myself someday Mom and Dad will recognize me for more than just the quiet helper, the nurse who never complains. The house we grew up in is my secret power. Daniel and I protect it fiercely, like a lifeline I'm not ready to cut. I haven't used it as a weapon, yet. I'm still playing the long game, waiting for a moment that might never come, hoping that patience will bring respect. But sometimes, when the silence stretches too long, I wonder if I'm just fooling myself. The first public humiliation cut sharper than I expected. It was my cousin's wedding last summer, an elegant hall draped in white flowers and twinkling lights. I stood in front of the family, holding a glass, ready to give a toast. My voice was steady as I spoke about the importance of family support, the ties that bind us even in hardship. But then Hayden, ever the showman, cut in mid-sentence. "Wow, Loretta, did you write that in a Hallmark card?" he sneered, loud enough for half the room to hear. Laughter erupted from some cousins, while others exchanged uneasy looks. Mom smiled weakly, but said nothing. My cheeks burned red, and my chest tightened. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, my words mocked and dismissed in front of everyone. I wanted to vanish, to sink beneath the polished floorboards. Yet, I told myself, he's just stressed. He didn't mean it. But the sting lingered long after the laughter died down. After I finished, I quietly excused myself and stepped outside into the cool night air, trying to steady my breath. The ache didn't fade. That night, I realized I couldn't keep pretending Hayden's actions didn't affect me. I refused to go to the after-party, a small, deliberate act of self-respect. It was the first time I pushed back, even if just a little. I didn't know then what that moment meant, only that I couldn't stay invisible forever. I thought my small act of standing my ground might earn some respect, but Hayden saw it as a challenge he couldn't ignore. Almost immediately, a quiet storm brewed beneath the surface. Whispers began to ripple through the family like poison. Loretta's always been too sensitive. She's just jealous of Hayden. She's making a mountain out of a molehill. I heard the words in hushed tones when I thought no one was listening, felt the weight of eyes sliding away from mine during family gatherings. It was as if I had suddenly become the problem, the one everyone was wary of. Mom and Dad seemed to absorb these lies without hesitation. Their warmth, once steady and comforting, became cool and distant. At Sunday brunches, the empty chair beside me was a glaring reminder of the space Hayden had carved out with his stories. Relatives who used to rely on me for advice and support began to sidestep me, their smiles brittle, their greetings perfunctory. Even Daniel's aunt called him one afternoon, her voice heavy with concern. "That Roberts family drama is toxic, Daniel. Maybe it's best to keep your distance for now." The words stung because I knew the truth. She was siding with Hayden. Then came the gaslighting, the most insidious part. At a family brunch, Hayden's lips curled into a sneer as he met my eyes. "You're imagining things," he said, loud enough for several relatives to hear. "Everyone knows you're the problem, not me." His tone was mocking, dismissive, but I could feel the room constrict around me. I caught a glimpse of Mom's hesitant glance, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes that quickly vanished. I began to wonder if maybe I was the one losing grip on reality. Was I really too sensitive? Was my sense of hurt just a fabrication? The isolation wrapped around me, heavier each day, but I clung to the tiniest flicker of hope that things might, somehow, still get better. Despite the growing coldness, I refused to let the silence settle completely. If anything, those whispers made my resolve sharper. I spent nights replaying every interaction, trying to understand where the fault lay, hoping to find a way to patch the cracks without breaking. But underneath, a quiet rage simmered, a burning need to reclaim my place, to be seen not as the troublemaker, but as the daughter who had been quietly sacrificing all along. I wasn't ready to disappear. Eventually, I gathered the courage to ask for a family meeting. The air in the living room was thick with tension. As I sat across from Hayden and our parents, my hands folded tightly in my lap to keep from shaking. I tried to keep my voice calm and steady as I laid out the facts. How Daniel and I had been paying the mortgage, the hours I'd spent caring for Dad after his surgery, the weight of the sacrifices I kept hidden. "I want us to be a family," I said, meeting their eyes. "But I need to be seen and respected." Hayden blinked. the sheen of feigned tears catching the light as he responded, "You just don't understand how hard I've worked for this family." His voice dripped with victimhood, twisting the truth until it was unrecognizable. Mom's eyes softened, and she gave me a cautionary look. "Loretta, don't make this harder than it is," she warned gently, her words cutting deeper than any accusation. Our uncle, who'd agreed to mediate, nodded in agreement. "You need to let go of grudges," he said, as if my feelings were mere bitterness to be discarded. I left that conversation feeling deflated, the crushing weight of injustice pressing down on me like a physical force. The hope I'd carried in my heart felt fragile, cracking under their rejection. But even in that moment of despair, I didn't give up. If anything, the failure sharpened my conviction. Change wouldn't come from peace talks or quiet hopes. It would require something more. I knew now that standing still was no longer an option. I had to find a way to fight for my place in this fractured family, no matter the cost. 2 months later, the damage Hayden inflicted moved beyond words and whispers. I was volunteering at the hospital fundraiser one evening, the gleam of polished floors and soft chatter filling the room, when he delivered his next blow. Standing close enough for my colleagues to hear, Hayden let a smirk curl on his lips as he said, "Maybe Loretta's nurse skills aren't the only thing lacking. I heard she's been passed over for promotions because she can't handle pressure." The words landed like a slap, sharp and public. The room fell into an uneasy silence. I felt the heat rush to my face, burning hotter than embarrassment. This was humiliation wrapped in malice, designed to unravel me in front of the people I respected and worked alongside. Daniel's jaw tightened beside me, his eyes warning Hayden without a word. The sting of his attack wasn't just personal anymore. It was professional damage, a rumor that could jeopardize my career and everything I'd worked for. The betrayal cut deeper because I had always believed in integrity and hard work. Later, I confronted Hayden privately, my voice tight with anger and disbelief. "Why would you say something like that?" I demanded, struggling to keep my composure. He shrugged as if it was no big deal. "If you can't handle the heat, stay out of the kitchen," he said coldly, his words a calculated shot meant to break me. I realized then this wasn't a careless insult. It was a strategic strike aimed at my foundation, meant to isolate me further and undermine my strength. The weight of his betrayal settled heavy on my chest, but I refused to let him see me broken. Not yet. Even after that brutal encounter, I reached out to Hayden one last time. We met over coffee, the bitter aroma swirling between us like an uneasy truce. I laid my feelings bare, the ache in my voice unmistakable. "I want us to support each other, to rebuild," I said, hoping for a glimmer of warmth. I told him what I needed: respect, acknowledgement, a chance to be more than just the shadow in the background. But his smile was cold, devoid of any sibling affection. "I don't owe you anything, Loretta," he said, his tone clipped and final. When I pressed for some semblance of reconciliation, he leaned in, his eyes hard. "Remember, I could tell everyone those personal things you confided in me years ago," he threatened quietly, his words slicing through my vulnerability like a knife. The power dynamic shifted in an instant. I was exposed, weaponized by the one person I thought might understand me. I left that meeting feeling hollow and rejected. The last fragile thread of hope snapped. For the first time, I admitted out loud to Daniel, my voice barely above a whisper in the dark. I did everything I could. There's no saving this from his side. The truth settled like cold ash inside me. The family I'd tried to hold together was fracturing beyond repair, and I was left to face the fallout alone. The fallout was worse than I thought it could be. The rumors Hayden planted spread like wildfire, poisoned whispers twisting my name into something ugly and unrecognizable. Invitations that used to arrive in the mail stopped coming altogether. Phone calls went unanswered, texts ignored. Even family members I had once considered allies turned cold, their voices clipped and distant when I tried to reach out. I felt like I was shrinking, fading into the walls of my own life. The silence was deafening. Daniel was the only one who didn't turn his back. He sent messages late at night, reminding me I wasn't invisible, that I wasn't alone. One evening, after a particularly painful day, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My eyes looked tired, surrounded by shadows, and for the first time, I whispered to myself, maybe I am the problem. The words tasted bitter, yet they echoed a fear I'd tried to silence for so long. Doubt crept in, wrapping its cold fingers around my heart. What if all this pain was because I was too sensitive, too flawed? I sank onto the edge of the tub, my breath shallow and ragged. The silence around me felt like a void, swallowing every ounce of hope I'd clung to. But beneath that exhaustion, a quiet resolve began to stir, faint at first, but growing stronger. Maybe this was the moment I stopped pretending. Maybe I had to stop waiting for someone else to see me. Maybe I needed to start seeing myself. The next morning, Daniel stopped by with a cup of coffee and a look of quiet solidarity. "We're not invisible," he said firmly, pressing the warm mug into my hands. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. The world had turned against me, but he hadn't. That made all the difference. Even if the road ahead felt like walking through a storm with no shelter, the weight of loneliness pressed down with every passing day, but it also sharpened something inside me, a determination not to be erased, not to disappear quietly into the background of my own story. I was more than the rumors, more than the silence. I just had to figure out how to fight back. The night of our 7th wedding anniversary party was supposed to be a celebration. The Roberts family home buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, the scent of fresh flowers mingling with the faint aroma of candle wax. I smiled as I tore open the card from Mom and Dad, expecting heartfelt words, maybe even an acknowledgement of my efforts, of us. But my smile froze as I stared at the blank inside. No signatures, no message, nothing. The silence in that card screamed louder than any words could. Across the room, Hayden's wife held up an envelope with a flourish, revealing a generous $50,000 check from our parents as a wedding gift. The room shifted. Murmurs circled like a dark cloud. Daniel's eyes widened in shock, and I caught the flicker of disbelief on his face. Mom quickly averted her gaze, cheeks flushing, while Dad's discomfort was almost palpable. The contrast hit me like a blow. Hayden's family basked in visible approval, while I was left with emptiness. Later, whispers reached me that the house Daniel and I had kept afloat, the one I legally owned, was being discussed as Hayden's inheritance, bypassing me entirely. The very foundation I had fought to preserve was being used as a bargaining chip to continue erasing me. I stood there, heart pounding, as the veil lifted completely. This was no longer about favoritism disguised with polite smiles. It was financial, legal, and ruthlessly brutal. Hope died that night. In its place, a cold clarity settled in my bones. I was done being the invisible daughter, the silent supporter, the background character in my own family's story. I was done hoping for recognition that would never come. Something inside me broke free, not with tears or pleas, but with a quiet, fierce decision. I would no longer stand aside. I would no longer be invisible. After the party, I retreated to our bedroom, the walls closing in with memories and unspoken truths. Years of sacrifice flashed like an unforgiving slideshow. Unacknowledged payments, birthdays missed while tending to hospital shifts, meals eaten alone because someone had to be available for Mom's calls. My hands trembled as I sank onto the bed, the weight of it all pressing down like a relentless tide. Anger flared, sharp and raw, fueled by the sting of betrayal. It wasn't just Hayden. It was Mom and Dad, too. The people who should have been my refuge, who should have seen me. Their silence was louder than Hayden's insults. I felt betrayed by the very people who raised me, who should have protected me from feeling small and invisible. I realized then that this pattern, the favoritism, the dismissals, the coldness, was never going to change. I had been blinded for years by love and loyalty, hoping that someday they'd see who I truly was beneath the sacrifices and quiet pain. But hope wasn't enough. I needed power. I held the truth in my hands, the papers proving my ownership of the house, the financial records Daniel and I had painstakingly maintained. They didn't know I had all this. Never again, I whispered to the empty room, the words of vow etched in fire. No more silent suffering, no more invisible battles. I wasn't going to fight with anger screaming from the rooftops, but with strategy, with precision. I was done being the victim. I was ready to become something else entirely. That night, Daniel and I sat side by side at the kitchen table, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. "It's time," I said, my voice steady, the weight of years settling into a new purpose. He looked at me, eyes tired but determined, nodding slowly. "I'm done waiting," I added. "I'm done hoping for change that won't come." We began to sketch out a plan, not in detail yet, but broad strokes. We would expose the favoritism, hold the family accountable, and reclaim what was mine. Daniel's support was steady, but cautious. "We'll do this right," he said. "No rash moves. We need to be careful." I identified Hayden as the primary target, not just because of what he had done to me, but because he embodied everything that enabled this injustice. He was the gatekeeper of their approval, the favored one who thrived on keeping me invisible. Taking him down was the first step. The real work had only just begun. The first step was gathering evidence, solidifying support, and reclaiming my narrative. The time for silence was over. I felt a spark of something unfamiliar. Hope, yes, but tempered by the cold clarity of a woman who had been pushed to her breaking point and refused to break again. This was the start of a new chapter, and this time, I would fight. I sat at the kitchen table one quiet evening, spreading folders and papers before me, the dim light casting long shadows across the scattered documents. Each folder held pieces of a puzzle I was determined to solve. The debts Hayden owed, the favors he'd exploited without a second thought, the lies he spun to keep his image spotless. The weight of it was suffocating. How had I missed the scale of his manipulation for so long? Each bank statement, each text message I printed, felt like a small victory, tangible proof of the invisible battles I'd been fighting. I ran my fingers over the edge of a document showing my steady mortgage payments, proof that the house was mine, legally and unquestionably. It was my fortress, my leverage, and I clung to it like a lifeline. I reached out to Clara, a trusted family lawyer who had quietly supported me during past disputes. Over coffee, I laid out everything: documents, timelines, emotional scars. Clara's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, then softened with reassurance. "Loretta, this house is firmly in your name. Any claim Hayden or your parents try to make without your consent, we'll challenge it. Hard." Her certainty steadied me. The legal side was clear. What remained was the emotional battlefield. I began cataloging not just financial proof, but the emotional toll. The texts where Hayden twisted words, the times Mom subtly diverted funds that should have been mine. The family's dependence on me was a fragile lie they couldn't keep up. They leaned on my support without ever acknowledging it. I realized I held the cards, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to play them. Late into the night, I sat alone with my thoughts swirling like a storm. How many times had I been the family's quiet provider, absorbing their disappointments and anger while they guarded their secrets? The cracks in their facade were invisible to most, but I could see them all too clearly now. My mind went over every overdue bill I'd paid, every sacrifice hidden behind forced smiles. The house was more than a home. It was the final line of defense, the proof that I mattered. Having this knowledge felt bittersweet. I wasn't just cataloging evidence. I was reclaiming a long-denied truth about my worth. And as the clock ticked past midnight, I whispered to myself, this is just the beginning. Days turned into weeks, and every moment was spent mapping out vulnerabilities. I made a list of every dependency the family had on me, financial, emotional, practical, and started thinking strategically. Hayden thought he had the upper hand, but I was quietly gathering strength. The weight of it all was exhausting, but underneath, a fierce determination burned brighter. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for the truth, for the years lost to silence. With every document I filed, every piece of evidence compiled, the invisible threads began to weave a story I was no longer ashamed to tell. I could almost hear the walls shifting, the family's fragile equilibrium trembling under the weight of my quiet resistance. The house was mine, and with it, the power to finally be seen. The next steps felt like threading a needle, delicately precise but impossible to ignore. I began by securing my own domain. Passwords changed, accounts locked down, legal paperwork updated. Every email, every bank account, every digital footprint, secured. I wanted no surprises, no loopholes Hayden could exploit. I called the bank, updated my power of attorney, and reviewed our will with Clara to make sure everything was airtight. This was no longer just about emotion. It was about control, about fortifying my position before I made my move. Yet, outside this quiet storm of preparation, I kept my mask on. At family dinners, I smiled and nodded, playing the part expected of me. I laughed gently at Hayden's jokes, kept my voice steady when Mom asked about work. No one suspected the plans weaving beneath my calm exterior. The tension was like a silent drumbeat, pulsing just out of sight. Every day, I felt the calm before the storm, a suffocating quiet that tightened my chest but steeled my resolve. My mind was a constant countdown, measuring moments until I could act without hesitation. Emily, our youngest sister, had started watching me differently. I noticed the way her eyes lingered longer when I spoke, the subtle shift in her posture when Hayden entered the room. Once shy and quiet, she seemed to be gathering courage, her silent support a balm to my growing isolation. One evening, as we cleared the dishes together, I caught her glance, a mixture of fear and determination. I wanted to reach out, to tell her it was okay to stand with me, but I held back, letting her come to me in her own time. For now, this fragile alliance was enough. Behind my calm facade, my heart raced with anticipation and dread. Each carefully laid plan was a promise to myself, a promise that the next chapter wouldn't be written in silence and pain. Hours stretched into days, and every night I lay awake, feeling the weight of what was to come. I was no longer the invisible daughter. I was becoming the architect of change. Then, one quiet evening, Emily came to me holding a worn envelope, her hands trembling slightly. The room felt colder suddenly, as if the air itself had thickened. Inside were letters and bank statements, evidence I never expected to find, showing that Mom had secretly diverted nearly $200,000 from our late grandfather's inheritance. Money that should have been mine. My breath caught in my throat. The betrayal wasn't just favoritism anymore. It was theft at the highest level. I never wanted to get involved, Emily whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. But I can't watch you suffer anymore. Hayden's been manipulating everyone. Mom, Dad, even me. Her voice cracked, raw and honest. The strength in her confession shocked me. Emily, who'd always been on the sidelines, was now standing firmly by my side. The weight of her alliance made my resolve deepen in ways I hadn't anticipated. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was a reckoning. I stared at the papers, the truth settling over me like a storm breaking loose. The inheritance was gone, buried beneath lies and silent betrayals. My mind raced. How long had this been happening? How many promises were broken under the surface of their polite smiles? The stakes had just been raised, and the urgency to act consumed me. For years, I'd faced Hayden's games alone, but now I had proof, and I wasn't going to let this slide. Emily's tears mirrored my own. The fragile bond forming between us was a lifeline in the darkness. We'll get through this, I said quietly, squeezing her hand. Together. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope, dangerous, fierce, and undeniable. The very next day, I instructed Clara to draft formal notices to Mom, Dad, and Hayden. The letters demanded explanations for the financial discrepancies, the inheritance diversions, and the manipulations Emily uncovered. I wanted transparency, accountability, and most importantly, justice. This was no longer about quiet suffering. It was about reclaiming what was mine. The lawyer's voice over the phone was steady, but I felt a tremor inside. This was war, thinly veiled in legal terms. Simultaneously, I made a decision that cut deeper than any letter. I withdrew all financial support from the family. No more paying bills, no more covering medical expenses. The silence that followed was heavy and immediate. Hayden's calls went unanswered. The steady stream of messages from my parents dried up. I imagined the shock behind their polite facades as they realized the safety net they'd depended on was gone. For once, the tables had turned. I could feel Hayden's facade cracking. The confident smirk faded as texts went ignored, As the money I'd quietly sent stopped coming, I kept my composure, knowing that patience was my greatest weapon. Daniel stood by me through it all, his quiet admiration a steady anchor. "You're so controlled," he said one night, pride evident in his voice. "This isn't just about anger, it's strategy." I nodded, aware that every move was calculated with care. This wasn't a reckless fight. It was a battle I intended to win. Around me, family whispers swirled like smoke, hushed conversations and sideways glances. They sensed a shift, but the full picture was still just out of their reach. I moved through their suspicion with quiet confidence, knowing that the first moves had been made and there was no turning back. The game had begun, and I was in control for the first time in years. The room held its breath as I stood in front of everyone, the weight of years pressing down on my shoulders. I felt the steady thrum of my heart beneath my ribs, but my voice was calm, clear, unyielding. "This," I said, holding up the empty card I'd kept for 7 years, "was the gift I received from my parents on my wedding day." The silence stretched, thick and heavy. No check, no note, nothing. I let the words settle like stones in the quiet room. Then I placed the framed checks on the table, the ones Hayden and his wife had received, crisp and unmarked, alongside the documents proving my financial contributions, the mortgage payments I'd made alone, the inheritance that had been quietly redirected without my knowledge or consent. Gasps rippled like a wave through the crowd, eyes darting between the papers and me. Hayden's confident smirk evaporated, replaced by stunned disbelief. He looked unmoored, the golden child suddenly exposed in harsh, unflattering light. Emily stepped forward, her voice steady but laced with emotion. "I've seen it too, the truth we were all kept from." Her words struck a chord that reverberated through the room. Mom's face flushed a deep, burning red, while Dad averted his gaze, unable to meet any of ours. The layers of deceit cracked open in the most public way possible. I took a slow breath and declared, "The era of favoritism ends today. Respect and fairness are not optional. I demand what is rightfully mine, and I expect honesty from this family." The room fell silent, the weight of my words sinking in. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a reckoning. The power had shifted, and everyone felt it. Hayden's usual composure shattered, and for the first time, I saw fear flicker behind his eyes. The balance of control he had long wielded was slipping through his fingers. I could feel the room's tension shift, thickening like smoke, as my family grappled with the truth that had been buried too long. I stood tall, no longer invisible, no longer a silent victim. The champagne moment was mine, and the tides had turned irrevocably. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Hayden's carefully curated fortress of lies began crumbling as whispers turned to outright confrontation. Financial institutions contacted me, questioning the validity of his claims on the family estate. Relatives who had once bowed to his charm now looked at him with doubt, some quietly confronting him in hushed tones. Messages flooded my phone, texts, emails, and calls from family members desperate for clarity, others secretly hoping to align themselves with the new truth. The weight of their words was heavy, but I answered only when necessary, holding firm in my resolve. Mom and Dad reached out too, their voices tight with apology, promises hanging uncomfortably between us. "Loretta, we never meant for it to go this far," Mom pleaded one evening, her voice cracking. But I kept my boundaries solid. I wasn't here for empty words or half-hearted regrets. Their apologies felt like echoes of past neglect, and I was done forgiving without change. Slowly, the fog of reverence around Hayden began to lift, revealing the cracks in the family's story. People whispered about the years of deception, wondering how they had been so blind for so long. The carefully maintained hierarchy that had defined our family life was collapsing, piece by piece, under the relentless weight of truth. Despite the chaos, I kept my footing, refusing to be drawn into the drama or manipulation. My focus remained clear: accountability, fairness, and reclaiming my dignity. The Roberts family's facade was shattered, and though the fallout was painful, it was necessary. I sensed the fragile beginnings of realignment, where honesty might one day replace favoritism. For now, I stood firm amid the storm, the calm eye at the center of a family unraveling. But Hayden wasn't ready to surrender. His desperation grew palpable, manifesting in venomous texts, veiled threats, and attempts at legal intimidation. "I'll ruin you, Loretta," one message hissed in the dead of night. He painted himself as a victim publicly, spinning tales of a smear campaign designed to destroy him. Relatives were manipulated into choosing sides, flying monkeys sent to pressure Daniel, attempting to isolate me once more. The old patterns tried to reassert themselves, but I was prepared. Legal counsel was poised, ready to counter every move. Daniel's unwavering support was my shield, grounding me when Hayden's attacks felt suffocating. I refused to engage with his provocations directly, knowing that silence and strategy were my strongest weapons. Meanwhile, some family members, exhausted by the endless conflict, began reaching out to me privately. Their apologies were sincere, tinged with regret and a desire to heal old wounds. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," one cousin admitted quietly, her voice heavy with guilt. These moments renewed my hope for reconciliation, even if the road was long. Hayden's isolation deepened visibly. His confident facade cracked under the pressure of failed schemes and fading alliances. The once dominant figure in our family was now a shadow, desperate and defeated. Watching him unravel was a bitter but necessary confirmation that truth had won its battle. The family's toxic hierarchy was finally dismantled, and though the scars remained, a new order was beginning to form, one where fairness wasn't optional. 6 months later, the dust had settled into a quiet, steady peace. The Roberts family gatherings were smaller now, stripped of pretense but filled with cautious honesty. Daniel and I had grown stronger, fortified by the trials we had endured together. Our bond was no longer just love. It was resilience, trust, forged in fire. I had established firm boundaries, family interaction on my terms, with respect as the baseline, non-negotiable and clear. Mom and Dad faced the consequences of their choices. Relationships altered but not utterly destroyed. Their regret was tangible, though tempered by the reality that some wounds heal only slowly. Hayden remained estranged, grappling alone with the truth exposed and the losses incurred. I didn't mourn his absence. Instead, I embraced the freedom it brought. The empty card I once treasured was no longer a symbol of neglect or pain. It had become a testament to my strength. It reminded me that I held the pen to my own story now. Reflecting on the journey, I felt no bitterness, only a quiet empowerment. Love without respect is a debt that demands repayment, and I had finally been paid in full. The future stretched before me, open and uncertain, but this time, I was ready. I was no longer invisible. I was the author of my own life, and the chapters ahead held promise, written not in silence, but with the fierce clarity of a woman who refused to be unseen.